Today's heroes are not always dressed in an officer's uniform or found under a fireman's helmet. For the thousands of people struggling through the maze of infertility, their heroes come offering technology and knowledge. You, the men and women of the medical community who specialize in fertility, give those dreaming of a family a renewed sense of hope. As fertility specialists, you are better equipped than ever to provide solutions for your patients' needs. Yet there's one growing problem that seems to be a very daunting challenge. Over 250,000 embryos have been placed in limbo at 300 degrees below zero after their genetic parents completed the in vitro fertilization process.
The more patients that come through, the more embryos we end up freezing and storing. And so we now had to acquire more tanks with which to keep the embryos in, which is taking up a great deal of space, which becomes somewhat prohibitive. And also those tanks need to be monitored and maintained, which initiates another expense. If the expenses continue to rise because of continued storage, more tanks, more maintenance, more monitoring, then the cost of treatment can eventually potentially rise up as well.
I've seen a large number of embryos frozen from successful IVF cycles. And a lot of patients have had difficulty in trying to determine what to do with those embryos. We as physicians, as infertility specialists, would like to spend more time helping people get pregnant than managing the cryopreserved embryo.
Many fertility specialists are unaware of all the choices available. Those choices include unexplored options in embryo donation and adoption. Currently, about half of the nation's fertility clinics offer some form of an embryo donation program. Yet field experts believe the potential for embryo donation is largely untapped. According to a study presented at the 2001 conference for the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, of those surveyed with embryos in storage, 12% were immediately willing to donate their embryos, and an additional 18% would consider placing their embryos if they had more information. Combined, that's a promising 30%. Here's news correspondent Leslie Layton.
Does that 30% represent a large number of people?
In traditional adoption, we're used to seeing maybe 1–2% of the population who would ever even consider adoption for their children. When you talk to a group of people who have never had to go through that experience and you say, if you were experiencing a pregnancy that you weren't ready to parent, would you consider adoption? Typically 1 or 2 hands go up in that room. And so we know that in traditional adoption, 1 or 2% actually keeps adoption agencies busy. So when you look at 30% of the people who are surveyed who are willing to even consider a donor program, that's a huge number.
Nobody grows up with the goal of one day placing a baby for adoption. But due to their circumstances, they find themselves having to make that difficult decision. Likewise, parents with embryos sometimes feel the psychological weight and burden of having embryos in storage that they never planned on. After the birth of their twins, Bob and Betty Burnett struggled with the decision of what to do with their embryos left in storage.
Why did you decide that embryo donation, adoption, was the best option for you?
It's hard to look at a photograph of 4 embryos knowing that 2 of them are now playing in your house and just summarily discarding the other 2. It's inconsistent in my mind.
There was a tremendous emotional inconsistency between the time and effort and life change that you go through to go through IVF or an assistive reproductive technique to create this possibility, and then going 180 degrees the other direction and saying, I don't want these embryos. It took months of thinking, praying, talking it out. I cried a lot. Could I really, what if I got pregnant with twins again? There are families with 2 sets of twins. I work full-time. We are the age that we are, financially, emotionally. How could we do it? And it just became, I felt like I was in a circle and I couldn't get out. I couldn't have these babies and I couldn't give them away. I couldn't just let them go away. I had to do something that made sense. And embryo donation was, as we came through all of that, the thing that made a lot of sense.
Genetic parents do feel a sense of loss. I think that they're sad that they do have these remaining embryos that they're not going to be able to give birth to. And yet, because of whatever factors there happen to be, whether it's emotional, financial, or physical, they can't give birth to those children. They've experienced infertility. They know what that loss is like. They've been able to experience the joy of being able to have children. And I think oftentimes the process of selecting an adoptive family to place their embryos with kind of creates a journey for them of joy in the hope of sharing parenthood with another family that is in a position where they once were.
For some families, the traditional donor programs meet all their needs, but there are other families who would prefer more control over their embryos' destinies. For them, an embryo adoption program would better meet their needs and motivate them to place their embryos. Many are drawn to the security of knowing the geographical location of their embryos and the notion of an open adoption based on their preference and comfort level. By offering embryo donation and adoption as a value-added service to your clients, you can not only share the hope of a new opportunity with your patients, you can also improve and expand your practice by reaching a new client base that you may not have had the opportunity of serving before.
Really, patients who might not have otherwise come to the clinic, when they become aware that embryo adoption is a possibility and one that might be more financially acceptable to them than things like egg donation, it allows really a new referral base that we have not otherwise been seeing.
Jerry and Leanne Vossen wanted to take responsibility for the embryos they created. Determined to make the right choice, they looked at all their options. Here's news correspondent Maria Hall Brown.
Why did you choose to donate your embryos to another infertile couple?
I helped create these children. I'm the one that chose, yes, I'm willing to do in vitro. And as a result, there's 13 embryos. And there's just a lot of responsibility there. And I just, would want everybody to remember what a blessing the children are and what a gift they are. And to be able to give that to another family who obviously is going to love these children because they want them badly and have been trying for them. And it's just awesome.
It's phenomenal. I mean, and I was telling somebody at work about it, and they looked at me and said, man, that's weird. I don't know if I'd feel... I'm thinking to myself, great home, great parents. They're going to love these children. That's too high. I can't push you higher. Like I love my own. To me, it's a no-brainer.
It's 6 a.m., and the morning stillness is broken by the sound of a baby's cry. Sharon Tesdall is ready to face another day, filled with diapers, feedings, and all the newfound wonders of her baby girl, Michaela. Not long ago, Sharon and her husband Larry, already parents to an adopted son, thought the thrill of giving birth was something they would never experience.
Before, we were just completely overwhelmed with infertility, and that was our whole world, and that's all we could think about. And now it's like it's another planet somewhere else. We look into the faces of our children and just realize how much we're blessed and are just so grateful for this opportunity.
Danielle and Jim Brinkman are glad that a genetic family decided to share with them the hope of parenthood through embryo adoption.
Why did you choose embryo adoption?
Having adopted members in our family really motivated Jim and I early on to investigate that avenue. That was something that we were excited about doing before we realized that we were facing infertility. So finding an option that combined adopting a child that needed a home, that needed a loving family, on top of getting to carry that child, was just the perfect opportunity for us.
The parents aren't the only ones who benefit from embryo donation and adoption. The doctors and clinics are also finding new sources of revenue.
Many patients cannot afford to do an egg donation cycle, and offering them a frozen embryo through the embryo adoption program has given them a chance at hope of having a conception.
With this new resource of adoption agencies having access to embryos literally nationwide, It allows just a greater alternative for patients who are seeking that kind of care. We're getting a lot of referral sources from these agencies from patients who otherwise would not have come to the clinic. So it's been a very, very beneficial relationship.
How do you benefit from your relationship with the fertility clinic?
We have to have their services. We are matching families, but we don't provide the medical side. We leave to the medical experts the expertise of doing embryo transfers. So we have to have a relationship with the clinic in order to refer clients to have the procedure done for the embryo transfer. For the genetic parents that we receive, many of them come from the clinics that we've worked with in the past.
What if the clinic doesn't have a program and does not wish to start one?
Many clinics have shared with me that they don't want to start one because it is very, very costly and can be very time-consuming to operate and manage it. So I think that by partnering with an attorney or an agency that has an embryo donation or adoption program, they're still able to participate in the benefits of embryo donation adoption without all of the managerial concerns and costs.
With embryo adoption being such a new concept, some clinics have avoided donation and adoption due to fear of legal repercussions. We spoke to adoption attorney Ron Stoddart.
It is not illegal in any state to transfer embryos from one family to another, but this is another area where the law has not kept pace with medical technology. The key is that there has to be a written document that clearly expresses the intention of the families. In the case of embryo adoption, that written document would typically include language covering the future contact between the families.
In some states, such as Florida, Louisiana, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Texas, and Virginia, laws have been passed which may have some bearing on adoption agreements. To find out more about current laws, visit www.embryoadoption.org. Accessing information to educate patients is now more convenient than ever. Websites, brochures, counter displays, posters, and educational videos are readily available. These tools not only make your job easier, it also ensures that your patients will be able to make an informed choice regarding their embryos. To improve your current donation program, start a new one, or work with an existing agency to facilitate your embryo adoptions, please log on to www.embryoadoption.org. Register to be included in the Worldwide Network link system so that new patients can find you. Share the hope with your patients by offering them a solution they may not have considered before. Thank you for joining us.